Hi class. In this lesson we're going to move on to the next step in creating this finished packaging document. The main things that we're going to be looking at here are adding further basic shapes and fills, pen tool for custom shapes if you need to make it, um, how to create patterns and arrangements for your kind of background graphics or textures, thinking about how to create compound shapes as well, where we need to make, for example, little icons or symbols, using PNGs for graphics where we can't really do them with a shape, and using the masking tool to take images and make them a particular shape, for example, like a circle. These are a range of basic skills that hopefully will cover what you need to do in your design, though obviously, because you're working on your own design, you'll have to use a bit of kind of common sense and try and take these basic principles and tools and figure out how you could use them to get the closest possible approximation of what you're trying to achieve with your design idea. Do by all means feel free to be creative and go for approaches which maybe I'm not covering in this video. Whatever works for you at the end of the day, but hopefully this will kind of point you in the right direction. So in terms of the kind of main part of this lesson, as I say, this is really about background and fills, and that includes these kind of textured patterns, images, that sort of stuff that we want to put in there. So just beyond the kind of plain background colors that we did in our last lesson. We're probably not going to go into text today. We'll leave that till the next lesson. So we'll just get started. When we have a look at where we should kind of roughly be by now, I've got two documents open here. Hold on. Just need to open up the other one. This is kind of a rough approximation of where you're going to be just now. Let's kind of go along the same lines it was before and try and stick roughly to making it look like this working rough that we have here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in these bars here, which are pretty straightforward. So we can just use a simple shape tool here, like a rectangle tool. And again, if you have bars or shapes, which are, for example, triangles, stars, polygons, ellipses, circles, and so on, we can just use this tool here to do that. So we'll just kind of draw one of them in. And I'm going to kind of position it centrally. So we've got four squares in a grid on either side. And then what I'm going to do is just copy it and paste it. So Control C, Control V. Incidentally, you can actually duplicate things in another way. I'll show you in a wee minute. I'm going to bring it down here and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm just going to use the angle tool here. And the reason I'm doing it this way rather than making a new one is it just keeps the sizes consistent. So I don't accidentally end up making one that's thinner than it's meant to be. The other way we can duplicate is by holding the Alt key on your keyboard and clicking and dragging, and that should allow you to just kind of make a duplicated copy. It could be quite handy. So we've got those bars there. The next thing we need to do is specify the color schemes in those, so we can just select these two, holding the Shift key. So click one, then click the other. Then use the eyedropper tool, and really anywhere that we've got that color. Likewise with this one, again we'd use the eyedropper tool and pick up the necessary color. Those don't have a border, so we don't really need to do anything else with them. The next thing we'll look at in terms of some basic shapes are these kind of little circles that we've got around in the kind of background area. So we'll just create a little kind of pattern for them. Try again, find the right place. So for that, it's really just a little series of circular dots, essentially. So we use the ellipse tool. When you're using the ellipse tool, you want to hold the Shift key to constrain it to make circles, and you'll find that they'll snap to the grid. So if you want to make them, whatever you're making, at a size that doesn't snap to the grid sizes, you might want to just go to turn your grid off. But I don't really mind, so I'm just going to make a little pattern here. And I'm going to try and minimize the amount of effort involved by just duplicating what I've already created and resizing it slightly. So I'll just make a couple of these using the Alt and drag option. And if you want to kind of have more control over the size, one of the other ways you can go about that is just to go here to the size and just kind of drag that up or down. Sorry, I've got the wrong size there. I've just got the height rather than, sorry, I've just got the width, should I say, rather than the height. Just undo that back to where it was. Can. There we go. I should have linked that wee thing there so that when I change the size, the width and the height change it the same amount. So we give that a wee tweak. And really, you know, for a pattern, if you're making a little pattern, just if it's little clouds, for example, if there's only going to be 3 different individual clouds that are in your pattern of lots of them, make those 3 individual clouds and then just duplicate them. And it will save you a lot of time in creating your kind of layout here. Now, that will kind of do for now because we don't need to fill the whole space. What I can do is just create that one little group, and then I can use my Alt and drag and duplicate it to make a kind of a selection, and then we can kind of tweak that a little bit, you know, if it's not quite the way we want it, to reposition things. But you get the idea. So it saves you a lot of time duplicating work. You know, you can select a few of them at a time, copy and paste, duplicate them until you've got your pattern made up with your shapes. Now, you'll notice that I haven't coloured or given them an outline yet. And the reason I've not done that is because it's generally a better idea to do that at the end of the process when you've got them all done. That's probably going to be enough to fill the spaces that I need to fill here and here. So I'm going to go over here again to my fills now that I've selected them all. Use my eyedropper and I'm going to fill them with that green. And I'm going to add a border. I'm going to set that border to 3 px. And I'm going to use the eyedropper to steal that darker green. And having done that, I'm going to grab these. I'm not going to group them. We could group them just now, but I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to just bring them over here onto the page, but I think I'll have to rotate them first. And just drop them down wherever I wanted them to be. Now, I think, to be honest, I probably would have preferred that the pattern was a little bit smaller, so I can just, you know, if I'm not happy with that, I can make it smaller. Control C, Control V, make another copy of them, and just grab a bunch of them and drag them over to fill in the gaps. There we go, that's fine. And again, just copy and pasting, and I'll rotate these around that way. I mean, with a random pattern, it really doesn't matter that much what you do with them. And then we can tidy up. There is a way to clip these so that we can get the edges instantly. If you want to do that, it should be possible by using a rectangle and then selecting that with the circles and clipping them. But to be honest, it becomes a bit of a hassle. So if you can, it's probably easier to just let them run over the edges if it won't matter, or delete any that do, or just slightly reposition them so that they're not causing a problem. So there is a way around it, but I'm trying to keep things as simple as I can for you. I don't want to overcomplicate unnecessarily. So that's those kind of background ones. Incidentally, I probably want to duplicate that again, and I've selected those, but I've probably got the background as well. So that's them now selected. So I can use Alt and click and drag, and just drop them up here. And then again, we can go in, we can just tidy up the ones that we don't really need in the middle here. These other ones that are kind of overlapping the edge won't really matter because that's the window, it's going to be cut out anyway. So it doesn't matter if they're there, they'll just get chopped away. And again, you can kind of move them about to reposition them as you feel necessary. So if you've got a random pattern, that's really all there is to it. If you have a pattern that's meant to be more organized, say it was meant to be rows of circles and they're all meant to be the same size, just create a single one. In fact, actually, I'll just copy one of these. There you go. So yeah, create your single one, and then you can just use your Alt and drag to drag as many of them down as you want. You can highlight them again so that you're duplicating multiples. There we go. So that we're just cutting our time down. And then to arrange them, what you can do is highlight them all, right click, align, and then you can align them through their centers or down the left side or the right side, depending on the shape you have. For a circle, it doesn't really matter because it's the same on every side. But if you had something that was like it was a, well, I don't know, maybe if you had a range of different shapes, but you wanted them all to line up with the left side, for example, you could use that. So we can align them all centrally. Then we can go to align, and this time what we can do is we can distribute vertically, and that will equalize the spacing between them all. So the gaps are equal now. And having done that, if you're trying to make a pattern, you can group that. So it's all just one big group here. And you should now be able to just alt drag to duplicate that and make as many of them as you want. I think I must have misclicked that. Hold on, try it again. It can be a bit funny with Gravit. For some reason, it doesn't always pick up groups individually, or as a whole, it picks them up as individuals. So you just have to watch that. Now, what should happen, and again with Gravit, this can be a bit funny. It doesn't always work. We should be able to then go in here with these, and again go to align and align top or bottom or wherever we want to get them all lined up. And again, we should be able to distribute centers, but this can go a wee bit awry. So we'll just say distribute horizontally. There you go, that worked. So the key thing though was before we get to this stage, we did need to group them, or else if you don't do that, basically it'll try and distribute every single individual. That's probably a better way of saying it. Every single individual circle, rather than the rows that you've created or the columns. So yeah, if you want to create a pattern of some sort, there's lots of tools there. Use the align tools and duplicate things to save yourself a bit of time. Now, moving on, if you've got some custom shapes that you need to make, you've got a couple of options really. Up here you can use the pen tool. So say for example you needed to make I don't know, like a kind of a right angled triangle that kind of pointed in like an arrow, you can make that symbol quite easily by just drawing it out. And then as before, you can just go and use fill tool, give it a fill, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go through the details, you get the idea. So you can use the pen tool to draw things. Now incidentally, when you're using the pen tool, it would seem when you start using it as though you can only draw straight lines, but that's not actually the case. What you can do is you can do, just start again, if you click and hold, so I click and hold rather than just clicking once on this next point, it allows me to drag these little handles out. So if I click and hold, I can actually make them kind of curved joins rather than straight joins. And then if you just click a single time, it goes back to being straight, sharp cornered joints. So you can choose how you want to draw things that way. And you can edit the shapes as well if you click on them. If you double click on them, you can grab the little handles, you can move them about just like you normally would in Zara. You can change the angles. You can even delete points if you find that you've got one that you don't need by selecting it and then hit the delete key. So you've got a lot of options in terms of creating custom shapes for your patterns or any graphics you need. So that's your kind of custom shapes. And finally, one of the things you might find useful is a compound. So I know that a few people have done kind of like a cloud sort of shape. So if you started off with a couple of circles or ellipses, I'll just duplicate that a few times. And I'm going to go one for the top, just to give yourself a kind of a rough cloud shape. Not the most beautiful cloud you've ever seen, but it serves the purpose. So we've got our kind of rough cloud shape there. And we can highlight that, and if you right click, you see create compound, and that takes those 4 shapes and it turns them into one. And we've got different options for how we use compounds over here, which I'll come to in a minute, and show you some other options. So if you were trying to make a little pattern of clouds, you could set your color to that, and if you wanted to, because you wouldn't be able to see it otherwise, you might want to add a border if it wasn't going against a background where it would be obvious. But then you can just kind of resize, duplicate, make your patterns and so on. So again, a couple of options there for making different shapes that you might want to use as part of your graphic. If you have other things like little flames, you can try drawing them. The one I'm going to come on to next, though, was making shapes with holes in them, because in this design here, I've got these circles that have holes and these kind of boxes that have a hole in the middle. So I'm just going to quickly show you how to do that before I show you one last thing. First thing is, we'll start with the circle, just to keep it easy. So we'll hold the shift key, just draw a circle that's about the right size for where I need this graphic down here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom in a wee bit if I can, to make it a bit easier to see. So we've created our main circle, but we need to create another circle to define the bit that we want to cut out of it in the center, because what we're trying to do is get this kind of donut shape here. So I've done my first circle. I'm going to do another circle now, and this circle here, again with the ellipse tool holding shift so it stays as a circle. I want to get that about the right size, probably a little bit bigger. It's getting close. Not quite exact. Well, yeah, that's probably about right. Yeah, that's probably about right. So we've got our two circles, this one and this one. It's not easy to see because they're both the same color, but it doesn't matter. So we select them both, right click, create compound. But this time, rather than making them a union or a join, we want to make them subtract. So that what happens is the inner circle chops out that other circle and gives us that kind of donut shape. And having done so, we could then add fills and borders and so on, but I'm not going to do that just yet because I have a few other things to add. So I'm going to make another one of these. I'm just going to duplicate it. Okay, so I'm going to take Alt and drag. Try again. There we go. Okay, so we've got one that's going to go down here. We'll make it about the right sort of size. And incidentally, if you click on it, you can actually still edit that inner circle. So I can make that inner circle a bit bigger if I need to. I can reposition it again. Probably easier to do that up here, but there we go. It's not quite perfectly lined up, but for the purposes of an illustration or a demonstration, it'll do the job. Let's take a wee minute to get that. There we go, that looks about right. Okay, so that's the circle that I'm going to need on the back for this bit here. Probably a bit too big, to be honest. Might resize it. And the little circle that I'm going to need at the front here, again, probably a bit too big. So I'll maybe just resize that a little bit as well. A bit funny when you select it, you just got to be careful you don't. You sometimes have to resize them both at the same time. It's a bit of a faff. Yeah, I'll just have to do that. It's fine. Let's make that one a little bit. In fact, actually, it's been silly. There's a clever way to do that. If we go to that, highlight them all. Right, there we go. This is why it's easier to do things outside of the object. If we highlight them both, we should, it says hopefully, we should be able to just go up here and then change the size using the wee control here to make the whole thing bigger or smaller, which would have been the sensible thing to do. But there you go. So we're going to take that, and if we can, try and move it. Ideally the whole thing at once. It's kind of a bit awkward, it doesn't seem to want to pick up the whole thing. Yeah. Well, anyway, you get the idea. It's a bit of a pain. Sometimes it doesn't seem to want to just kind of pick them up individually. We'll maybe try grouping it and see if that helps us move it. There we go. Yeah, bear with me. Sometimes it takes me a while because I'm not used to using the software yet either. So we've got those two shapes, and we need that kind of rectangular block that's going to go around that section. So again, create a rectangle about the right sort of size. So if I just kind of make it overlap by, about one box in each direction. So let's just find the right sort of position. So about here, and about here. And then if I just get another rectangle that I draw the same size as this, hopefully this will make sense. There we go. Again, I should probably zoom in so you can see what we're doing here. Make sure it's the same size as that center hole that we want. And bring it up, pop it on top of that one, and just do the same again. Create compound, subtract, and I think I'll just do what I did last time. This time I'll group them. I'm not doing this super precisely, just to get it done quickly. But that means we can then bring that back down here, and we've now got the two boxes that we wanted there. So I'll bring this one here to the front, range, bring to front, and I'm going to just select all three of them, that, and that, and I'm going to change their fill color to the same as that. Must have missed those in the selection there. Try again. So I'm going to get that selection. I don't know why it's not picking them all up. Do it individually if we have to. There we go. And we can also set the borders about 3 and choose our kind of dark green color. It should be on our swatch. Try again. Just zoomed out a bit too much. Yeah, so try again. So we go down here, borders, and I picked up the wrong color. It was that one that I wanted. There we go. Same again here. We can just go to the borders. The border. There we go. So get back to about 3. Set the color. There you go. So I'm not going to go through that for the last one. You get the idea. I don't want to make this more monotonous than it needs to be. The only other thing I was going to show you is how to get in images. And there's a couple of things that we can do with them. So first thing that you might find useful, if you had a pattern that you needed to add in, like for example train tracks, if you search for train tracks PNG, you want to find one that when you look at it here appears to have a plain background, but when you click on it and it opens up, shows a checkerboard, and that will indicate that it's a background or it's a PNG saved with no background. If you copy that and then paste it into your document, you'll find that it will come in as the object without the background, and that's useful for all sorts of things, like for example fire. If you had a design that had some sort of flame effect, if you can find one that's got a clear background, you can just copy it and drop it into your design, and you can duplicate, reposition, and so on as you normally would, so you can make that smaller or bigger. One of the handy things that you can do, right? So say we wanted, like, I know that that's not part of my design, but say I wanted this to be kind of a flame effect here. What I can do is I can use that rectangle to chop it out, but I do need to reset the fill again afterwards. So if I wanted this just to fit really nicely in that space there, if I select that box, or make a new one, doesn't really matter, bring it back to the front. Just going to reset the zoom. Yeah, so if I bring that to the front, so we'll right click on the box and arrange bring to front so it's on top of it. Really it's just because you need the shape to be on top. Select them both together, so holding shift to select them together, and then I can right click here and I can mask with shape, and that will use the shape to mask the image and cut it out. And we can still grab the image. If we double click on it, we can still grab the image and move it around within that frame, but it's masked by that shape. The only thing, as you see though, is that the shape loses its background fill, so you do need to go back here and choose the fill color again. So that's one way that you can go about adding images in, particularly if it's a PNG with no background. And the other example was, I was going to show you how we would do it for one of these. So say I had a picture of a toy car that I wanted to put in here. We would be using our render from Inventor if you have it saved in Classroom, if you got that far. If you don't, just use an appropriate image you can find online. So we'll just take this picture here, and we'll go in. I'm just going to undo that actually, because I don't really want that there. But you understand the principle of how to do it. So I wanted this toy car to fit inside the circle, probably this circle here. So I'm going to paste the picture. I'm going to draw a circle that's kind of roughly covering the area that I want to be in the picture. I can resize this later, so it's not a big deal if it's not quite perfect. I'm going to draw a circle over the top of that. It has to ideally fit within the image though, so we want to make it fit within the boundary of the image itself. There we go. That'll do. That's close enough. And then we select that circle and the image by holding Shift to select two things at once. Mask with shape, same as we did before, and we now have that as a kind of a shape or a circle that I can kind of place in here. Now, I could either try and position it really carefully, like resize and position it really carefully to get it within that gap there, or I could just make it a little bit bigger, just fractionally, and bring the graphic behind it to the front. So if I just select the kind of donut shape, go arrange, bring to front, that kind of gets around it. And it means that it's kind of sitting kind of nicely tucked away in there. So hopefully that gave you a kind of a sense of how you can go about adding background colors, textures, fills, and so on in. And also bear in mind you can use PNGs to bring in graphics. You know, you can get PNGs of almost anything. So like if you had leaves PNG, you'll find that you get these little kind of illustrations that you can probably bring in like that. And you'll see that it allows you to just drop in the image so that it doesn't kind of disturb your background color. Next lesson, we're going to look at doing the text. As I say, hopefully in this lesson, you've managed to get as far as getting the rest of your kind of background textures, graphics, patterns, whatever you want to call them, all the decorative stuff done. And if you've got any questions, because I'm sure you will, there's lots of things that you may have in your design that I wouldn't necessarily know about. So for anything like that, if you're not sure about it, let me know and I will do what I can to help. Okay, bye.